Now, Ramson's criteria is was a mechanism to make the diagnosis of pancreatitis, acute pancreatitis, and give you an estimate on the likelihood of dying from it. Most people don't use Ramson criteria anymore, but you're probably, I mean, this is one of those things that probably still exist on the national boards, and you're probably going to run into providers that ask you about it, so you should know what the Ramson criteria, what it means. So it looks at several things, and these are the values that you got from the lab earlier. When a person comes in, you get these as baseline values. And then within 48 hours, and by the way, we're going to talk about LDH and AST later on. Then within 48 hours, you repeat the blood draw and look at these different aspects. The criteria, you add up the number of positives here. If the blood sugar is over 200, if the white count's 20,000, if the calcium is 6, you add these things up as points. You come over here and apply it to the point system. If you score greater than 7, at or greater than 7, if you have at or greater than 7 of these things going on within 48 hours of admission, between those 5 and these 6, if you have 7 of them, there is a 100% chance that you are going to die. That's how serious acute pancreatitis can be. Okay? Even if you don't have 7, the mortality is quite high for something like this. Chronic pancreatitis is a whole different ballgame here. Chronic pancreatitis, there are several patients in Good Shepherd that have chronic pancreatitis. They go drinking, get a flare-up of their pancreatitis, and you don't, it's painful. You don't have to be as aggressive with chronic pancreatitis as you do with acute pancreatitis. With acute or chronic pancreatitis, there are a couple of things you want to do. One of them is gut rest. So you drop an NG tube down, give them nothing by mouth so that they're not digesting anything. You put them on IV nutrition. You put them on gut rest for however long it takes to get over this, and then pain control. Those are the two things that you focus on in addition to the nutrition and fluid balance. Now, occult blood in the stool, we talked about that yesterday. What I talked about yesterday, what you see here is fair game for the test, so make sure you pay attention here. It's relatively cheap to do. As I said yesterday, the incidence of one-card testing is, you don't rule out colon cancer with a one-card test. Although in a clinic setting, I would do it. Because if it's positive, then that's going to lead you down the road. If it's negative, it doesn't exclude anything, but if it's positive, it leads you down a different road. Understand, though, that the one-card test, you won't get reimbursed for it, so this is coming out of your pocket to do it in the office. Okay? False positives, I talked about meat yesterday. This is not the right thing because I've spelled, I had menstruation that's correctly spelled on the revised version. So sorry if you pull up the wrong version. That's not, when you menstruate, that's not how you do it. There's a U there, okay? I know how to spell it, I just wanted, so unlike the other thing that I said I knew how to do, I corrected this. So anything that interferes with the peroxidase reaction, and that's what turns the payment blue, you have to watch out for, and acids will interfere. That's why you have to worry about vitamin supplements like C, or drinking orange juice, that sort of thing. The FIT test, this is a more explanation. on the fit test here. What I failed to mention yesterday about the fit test is that you do 2 samples with the fit test. With the Hemocult, it's 3 samples. With the fit test, it's 2. It's not a one test thing. It's 2 separate stools. Okay. Fecal leukocytes, if you have an inflammatory process that you're worried about, the patient complains of, by the way, if there's blood in the stool, you don't need to do a guaiac or a fit test. The answer is obvious. If they have flaming hemorrhoids that are bleeding, don't worry about a guaiac or a fit test. It's going to be positive. Fecal leukocyte, though, is a test that you order. You give the patient like a urine specimen cup type thing, and you have them collect stool and bring it back to the lab, and they will solubilize it, put it on a slide, and look for and count the number of leukocytes in the stool that will be positive in inflammatory bowel diseases. Some of them are listed there. Inflammatory bowel diseases like ulcerative colitis are included, as well as Crohn's, and then infections like the Shigella salmonella or and E. coli. Those are quite frequent. A lot of the viruses, cholera, Giardia is, for those of you going on mission trips that wind up with giardiasis. This is not an inflammatory bowel disease. And it will help you exclude if you get fecal leukocytes. If somebody comes in with green, greasy stools, smelling, foul smelling, all the diseases, and you get fecal leukocytes and they're negative, then Giardia is one of the things that you should suspect. And there is an antigen test for Giardia in stool that you would want to get if you suspected that. Okay? Any questions about that? Now, the way you get a stool sample, don't give somebody a urine specimen cup and say, here, go poop in that. Because I don't know if you've ever tried to do that, but it's probably not, you're probably going to get more in your hand than you are in a cup. The way you do it is a thing called a nun's cap. Isn't that what it's called?
Nurse's cap.
Nurse's cap, nun's cap. I knew it as a nun's hat.
Yeah.
Nun's hat. Well, nun's hat.
Nurse's hat.
Nurse's hat. It's a little plastic white thing like that. It's about that deep that has a flange that you lift up the toilet seat, you put it on it, you poop into that. Then you give them tongue blades, some tongue blades, and they go and scoop out the poop and put it in the specimen cup. Or they, if it's liquid, they just pour it out. Now, when you're getting stool samples for culture and sensitivity, for example, you want to do aerobic and anaerobic. So you're going to have these 2 big test tubes that are about that big around. They've got fluid in the bottom, and then there's a line halfway up. That's the, you put enough poop in there to get the liquid to come up to the line. That's how you get a stool sample for aerobic and anaerobic culture and sensitivity, which should be coming up in the next slide. So you don't actually, you're not chasing people. Isn't it called, Kendall, isn't it called a nun's cap?
A nun's hat?
Nun, like a nun, like a Catholic nun.
No, we call it a nurse's hat.
Nurse's hat. That's old school. That's new stuff. I think the old school, it had something to do with nuns. I don't know why.
I didn't think nuns, nuns wore.
I don't know. Don't be jumping all over my ass. Just go with it. Go with it. Somebody Google it, please. So anyway,
It did, yeah, it is.
it is.
I
can shop
pulled
for
it
them
up
on
when
Google.
I put, nun's hat.
Is this something you poop into?
A nun's hat.
Nun,
I think
nun's
I'll put
cap.
for
Yeah,
stuff.
okay. All right, see, I'm not crazy.
There's one called a kit.
Now, if you're doing culture sensitivity, if you order a stool culture sensitivity, and you will be ordering this, understand that where it says routine, those are the things that you can tell on a culture sensitivity. If you have a suspicion for Campylobacter, if you have some kid that during the summertime, raging diarrhea, or if you have somebody presenting with Guillain-Barré syndrome, definitely get a culture sensitivity to Campylobacter. Remember, there's a correlation between infection with Campylobacter and Guillain-Barré. That's a board question right there, okay? Oh, it says it right there, associated with Guillain-Barré. Yersinia enterolytica, that's another one. In cholera, you're probably not gonna get a whole lot of that around here. If you have somebody doing mission trips though, you might wanna keep these, the special cultures in mind.
So with the specific ones, when you like put the order in, you would just say, I'm looking specifically for
Yeah,
those?
yeah, culture for Campylobacter. C. difficile is another one. Although you don't really need to culture C. difficile, there are other ways to find it. But if you're gonna culture C. difficile, it's a specific culture, not part of a routine stool CNS. Speaking of C. difficile, what you can do with that is to look for, the easiest way to do it is look for the toxin A. And it's like a pregnancy test, you know, you get the stool sample, you put it on a little rapid test, and you can tell very quickly about whether or not you're dealing with C. difficile. If JC, if I've had her on Bactrim for her UTI for 10 days, and then a week later she's coming in, she's got a fever, she's watery diarrhea, abdominal pain. One of the first things is, so on your differential is 1, C. diff. 2 is antibiotic-induced diarrhea. It's not C. diff. 3 is I've missed the whole boat with her initially. So you would definitely want to get a toxin A to rule out C. diff. What's the problem with C. diff? What's the C. diff infection of the cold? What's it called? Do you know what Clostridium difficile is? So if you have an overgrowth of Clostridium difficile, what's it called?
I thought it was just called C. diff.
No. It's a colitis that produces membranes that what look like membranes, but they really aren't. Pseudomembranous colitis, yeah, pseudomembranous colitis. Okay, so the next time you guys don't get an easy one like that, I'm gonna wrap the person I happen to be standing beside, okay, with this stick. Pseudomembranous colitis. Antibiotics, C. diff. It can kill you, okay? Don't miss it. Most of the time what you're going to run into is just antibiotic-induced diarrhea. You got little Johnny, you've treated for his ear infection, now he's got a flaming diarrhea, but he's not toxic, he's not feverish, he's not, he doesn't look sick, it's probably just antibiotic-induced diarrhea versus an infection with C. diff. They do look toxic and are feverish. Helicobacter, H. pylori, any questions on C. diff? H. pylori, different ways to measure it here. So if you measure it, like with the rapid test, it's looking for antibodies. It's looking for antibodies. So if you put them on the therapy to treat it, and you're successful in treating it, it goes away, note that they will still have antibodies in the circulation. An H. pylori test will always be positive. It stays positive for at least 6 months after a successful treatment. So you can only get an H. pylori testing, an antibody testing, once. If you are going to retest somebody and you think there's a treatment failure, then you can't use the antibody test. You have to go to something else. And there are different ways to approach it. One of them is a urea breath test. What H. pylori does is it converts, it makes urea. They, in the radiology department, or in certain, I think certain labs, you can send them to DLO for a urea breath test. They have the patients, they have a radioactive, I think it's a radioactive substance. They breathe it in, and when you breathe it in, some of it will get down into your GI tract, and the H. pylori will convert it, and when you breathe out, they measure the presence of urea. So if you have the urea in the exhaled breath, that says that you have a positive H. pylori test. Okay, I think it's a radioactive, a radiolabel type study. The other way to do it though now is with the stool. So you can collect the stool sample and look for antigen in the stool. The antigen is from the bug itself. So you know you haven't, this is an indirect, and that's an indirect method to detect it. The antigen test is a direct method. You're testing for the presence of the bug. The other way to do it is doing an EGD. They go in and they'll biopsy the inflamed gastric mucosa, and they can culture it or they can look for antigens at that point. Okay, but that's obviously invasive, requires a referral. If I'm going to retest for H. pylori, I do this, actually, sometimes I do the stool, sometimes I do the urea breath test. They cost about the same, so it doesn't really matter. Any questions about that? CEA, I mentioned CEA, I think yesterday, along with CA 19.9, 19-9, we were talking about neoplasia. CEA, you don't produce CEA now as an adult normally. This is a gene that gets turned off once you're no longer an embryo. It does, though, frequently get turned back on when in neoplasia. So CEA is an antigen. You're looking for the presence of a protein. You're not looking for the gene, you're looking for a protein in the blood. Most of the time it's used as a marker for reoccurrence of cancer. Or if you suspect cancer, getting a CEA or a CA, one of the CA, like CA 125 for ovarian, CA 19.9 for colon. There are different CAs that you would use, cancer antigens. These are specific proteins that get turned on in neoplasia. Okay? Testicular cancer you would get with this, you would get a CEA. You'd also get an HCG. So, any questions about this? Sweat chloride testing, the only time you use sweat chloride is to rule in or rule out cystic fibrosis. And do you know what a sweat chloride test is? Have you had that yet? They put a little patch on your forearm that has cholinergic type agent in it, and they iontophoresis it into your skin. So they put a low voltage charge through that little patch, and it causes you to sweat. They collect the sweat, they assay for chloride, the number is 60. If it's greater than 60, you have cystic fibrosis. If it's less than 60, you do not. I've ordered this a lot of times on little kids with failure to thrive, or they're just not looking right. They frequent URIs, frequent diarrhea, just failure to thrive. You can do a sweat chloride on little bitty infants down to just weeks old, and it's not painful, it's not shocking, it's not like tasing somebody, so it's a very low voltage. But 60, that's the board question, that's right there, board question, 60. If it's greater than, you got cystic fibrosis. Why is it chloride? Why do they look at chloride? Here's the stick. Why are we worried about chloride with cystic fibrosis? What's the pathology of cystic fibrosis? What's the defect? What is the gene defect in cystic fibrosis? Say it, Vince. Ah. Here comes the stick. I can't believe y'all don't know what the defect is in Swiss cystic fibrosis.
Yes.
Months ago. It's a defect in the chloride
CFTR.
channel, the membrane chloride channel, so that you don't move chloride like you're supposed to. So it builds up in the extracellular space. That's why they're more salty. That's why, because, chloride and sodium, where that goes, water goes, that's why secretions are thicker in cystic fibrosis. That's why they have mucus problems. That's what kills them. Mucus problems in their mucociliary tree in their pulmonary system. That's why they have problems with digestion, because the pancreatic enzymes in their gut doesn't work properly because of essentially chloride, ergo water balance. But it's a specific defect. Well, there are a bunch of different, there are a bunch of possible different defects in cystic fibrosis, and the penetrance can be, he can die at 10 years old, he can die at 40. You will die earlier, but the severity of the disease can differ based on which of the genes are infected. Amy?
So when would you test for this with a GI complaint? When there's a failure to thrive issue?
No, if you've got some month-old kid that's having, instead of, do you have kids?
Mm-mm.
When you have kids, you'll learn that kid shit is not like yours, okay? It's depending on if they're breastfed or bottle fed, what they eat, that's stuff in the little bottles, I mean, whatever, their poop changes over time. If it's not like that, if it's tarry, sticky, high fat content, and the kids are not gaining weight like they're supposed to, I'd be quick to pull the trigger on sweat chloride. The other thing is, a little kid should have respiratory complaints. I mean, they get sick all the time. You go to daycare, they're sick every month. You are too. But if they have frequent upper respiratory or pneumonias that are out of, one or two you can, okay, that's fine. But if you're having 5 or 6 a year, I'm going to get a sweat chloride on you. Especially, these kids do not do well. They don't thrive. They don't gain weight normally. The cystic fibrosis kid. All right, so now let's turn our attention to the liver here and look at the hepatocytes themselves, and then we'll focus on the biliary tree. Hepatocellular disease can present as either no symptoms or they can get pretty sick all the way up to coma that you see here. Pruritus is associated with hyperbilirubinemia, elevated bilirubin. It's not as pronounced as cholestatic disease, where you would have, for example, a bile duct obstruction from pancreatic cancer or from a stone or from something like cholangitis, inflammation of the biliary tree. By the way, inflammation of the biliary tree is an automatic admit. Don't send anybody home with cholangitis. Okay? That's an automatic admit. We already know about the clay-colored stools. The degree of pruritus intensifies with obstructive cholestatic disease. Okay. Physical signs, there are a lot of physical signs related to liver and cholestatic disease here. Some of them are pretty bad over here. When you look at these over here, spider angiomata and nail clubbing, what do these things look like? That looks like a newt. That dude looks like a newt that can climb a glass wall. That's a ridiculous amount of clubbing. You're never going to see that. But you will see things like this right here. You see how it's kind of clubbing. My wife swears that I have clubbing, but I think she's just nuts. So anyway, I don't have hepatocellular disease. Any questions about clubbing? You guys know what clubbing is, right? Okay, so jaundice, jaundice of the skin. Jaundice is a word used to describe yellowing of the skin. Yellowing of the sclera is called what? Icterus. Ooh, you got it. All right. Ascites, as a result of cirrhosis, can be marked. You know, one of the things you don't want to do with a person this big is, you know, there's probably 4 or 5 gallons or maybe even more of fluid in there. It's just like the cerebral edema. You don't want to pull all that 4 or 5 gallons off at one time. You want to pull a gallon off, or maybe a couple of quarts off, and then the next day you pull a couple more quarts off, and you do it slowly over time. You pull all of it off at one point, you're going to wind up with vascular collapse. The other thing about ascites is, what is the diuretic that you would use to treat ascites? It's a specific one. What is it? Spironolactone is the same one that's used to treat ovarian.
PCOS.
Yeah. Spider angiomata is, these are arterial dilations here. The body of the spider is the end of the artery, arteriole, and then it branches out from there into the capillaries. It looks like a spider. These things you should be noting on the physical exam. So this afternoon, when we talk about the abdomen, you know, we would say that the abdomen, the first thing you're going to do is inspect the abdomen. You would describe this as round or distended with a spider angiomata. Versus a spider nevus, this is not associated with hepatocellular disease. This is a normal type of nevus that you can see on the skin. These things don't blanch. The spider angiomata do. Pulmonary erythema is exactly what it says. So as a symptom or a sign of hepatocellular disease, you keep it alive. What is cirrhosis? I don't know if do we have a cadaver that had cirrhosis? Usually we have a cadaver with cirrhosis. The top is a normal liver. It's nice and smooth, and it's sort of brownish tan colored. A cirrhotic liver is bumpy and is hard, firm, and that's what they look like. When you get somebody with end-stage liver disease, these are really sick people, and this is what they look like. You see here, we characterize this guy as jaundiced and with a markedly distended abdomen. Stria are present. You can see the stria on the abdomen from the distension. I don't know about clubbing because I can't see the little fingers, but this is not a well person. Portal hypertension, you need to remember portal hypertension and what goes into portal hypertension. We described it a little bit yesterday when you have all of the GI tract, including the spleen, going through the portal vein into the liver, eventually to the inferior vena cava. I will give you a review of anatomy here. Know this. Okay. Splenic, inferior mesenteric, superior mesenteric are going to form the portal vein. There you go. Is it oxygenated blood or deoxygenated blood? Where's the why is it called a portal vein? There's a capillary bed on both ends. The one on the north end is in the liver. The one on the south end is in the GI tract, right? Okay. Prognosis of survivability with liver disease is the Child-Pugh equation, and what you do here is you look at bilirubin, albumin, and PT. Some people will look at INR, because PT and INR go hand in hand, you guys know that. And the presence of ascites and hepatic encephalopathy. Hepatic encephalopathy is graded on a scale called the West Haven scale, like West Haven, Connecticut. I just made up that state. There's a New Haven, Connecticut, right? I'm saying there's probably the west side of New Haven. They call it the West Haven scale. It goes from 0 to 4. So as far as encephalopathy, 0 is there's nothing. You encounter them and they act normal. 4, they're comatose. So 1, 2, and 3 give you different levels of memory disturbance, behavioral change, more severe. It's a subjective scale. You see here the survival probability for the different ratings in this scale. 2 years, it's not very good if you have a pretty significant degree of hepatocellular disease. Now, on the urinalysis, I think we went over this before. The difference between conjugated and unconjugated bilirubin. We've been through that before, right? We've been through how you get urobilinogen and which of those can appear in the urine, which ones cannot. Just to refresh your memory, if you get a CMP, you're going to get a total bilirubin and then either a direct or an indirect. So let's say we get a direct bilirubin and a total bilirubin. All you got to do is subtract the direct from the total, and that will give you the indirect. Now, unconjugated bilirubin is actually conjugated to albumin. Because it's conjugated to albumin, it cannot get through the glomerular membrane, filtration membrane. So you will not have unconjugated bilirubin in the urine. From the spleen, where its bilirubin is processed, or where hemoglobin is processed, it makes its way through the portal system to the liver, where it is conjugated to a diglucuronide molecule. That makes it water soluble and excretable through the kidneys. Once you get conjugated bilirubin into the GI tract, bacteria act on it to make urobilinogen. Some of that urobilinogen is reabsorbed and enters the circulation. It too is water soluble, so it shows up in the urine. It's the urobilinogen that gets into the GI tract that's converted to stercobilinogen. And I think these words are all up there on the slide. That turns the stool brown. It's also the urobilinogen that's in the urine that turns it golden yellow. If you have too much conjugated bilirubin and urobilinogen in the urine, it will be the color of iced tea. Tea-colored urine is pathognomonic for hyperbilirubinuria. Obstructive lesions in the bile duct system that prevent the formation of urobilinogen, that's where you get the clay-colored stools. So review this heartily. Right. Things to know. Here's what I just said summarized. Okay? By the way, when you break down hemoglobin into globin and heme, heme you're getting rid of. You don't get rid of globin. What do you do with the globin? What is globin? It's what?
Globular protein.
It's a protein. You don't want to get rid of proteins. You recycle proteins. So those are recycled. They're broken down into amino acids that re-enter the circulation, they get taken up and reused somewhere else. Okay, very good. Reporting bilirubin, here you go. Calculate one from the other, just like I said. Now, hemolytic jaundice. When you have a jaundiced person, is that jaundiced person is the jaundice due to an elevated bilirubin because of an obstruction of the bile duct system, or is it due to some other cause? And one of the causes would be on the hemolytic side. Hemolytic jaundice is it happens when there is an early or profuse breakdown of red blood cells, like in G6PD deficiency or sickle cell disease, any type of hemolytic disorder. Also, in people with massive trauma, where they have ecchymosis, like a road rash, bruising, that hemoglobin is eventually going to be reabsorbed into the circulation and processed. They can become jaundiced from that. So anywhere where you have a hemolytic process, you can get a jaundice associated. It's where it says absorption from hematomas, that's what I'm talking about. Okay? Biliary obstruction, we know about. So if there's a biliary obstruction, if you've got a stone sitting there in the ampulla of Vater, what do you think the total bilirubin, the conjugated and unconjugated bilirubins will be? I'm coming for you. If you have a stone blocking the bile duct, and you're as yellow as a gourd, what is your total bilirubin? It's high. What is your unconjugated bilirubin?
Normal.
It's normal. It's normal because you process hemoglobin at a steady rate. So the reason you have a high total bilirubin will be because of the high conjugated bilirubin. You can't get the conjugated bilirubin into the GI tract. It's getting into the circulation. Versus Miss Dove here has G6PD deficiency. She's yellow as a gourd. Her total bilirubin is what? High. Her conjugated bilirubin is going to be what?
Normal. Could be low if it's not
It
getting
might be
there.
normal, but it also might be high because it's being presented with a very high level of unconjugated. She's making more unconjugated because she has more red cells break down. Because you make more there, her conjugated is going to go up a little higher too. All right, so that's how you kind of use this system here. All right. When you're talking about intrahepatic cell damage, we're going to classify some damages here. These are some of the reasons here. Cirrhosis to infection. Add to this cytomegalovirus, CMV. You can get a CMV hepatitis. That's kind of common. Okay? When you're looking at jaundice, there are different levels here in terms of the bilirubin, where you start to see yellowing. The first thing here is the eyes. A level that goes, so the normal bilirubin is about 0.5 conjugated and 0.5 unconjugated with a total of 1. Now, that's going to vary a little bit between labs, but that's essentially it. The total bilirubin is usually 1 milligram per deciliter. Half of it's conjugated, half of it's unconjugated. You get a total bilirubin of 3 milligrams, your eyes turn yellow. 5, and then, by the way, you start turning yellow from your head down. By the time you get down to your toes, you've got a huge bilirubin level there. Okay? One of the things about the bilirubin is it gets deposited in the skin and it makes you itchy. People with itchy skin, they start around 2. Once you get to 5, they're gonna be itchy. They're gonna be complaining about, they itch all over. Okay. Newborn jaundice is when a baby is born, a couple of things happen. One is they don't have the enzymes to process bilirubin normally. And about 60% of kids, newborns, will start having their bilirubin level elevate. It's just a normal process. If they're breastfed, it actually is, the incidence is higher because the breast milk deactivates the enzymes the baby does have. So what you do during at the first days after delivery is you're looking for jaundice in the child, and you get a bilirubin level. If the bilirubin level is greater than those numbers there at certain times, and this is a timed thing, then you need to treat it. If it's in excess, greater than 25 milligrams per deciliter, it can produce neurologic damage. That's called kernicterus. 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 Kernicterus is a permanent neurological damage from hyperbilirubinemia of the newborn. So if you get a newborn in and their bilirubin level is starting to go up, one of the first things you do is you tell mom to stop breastfeeding. Put them on put them on formula for a week and go back to breastfeeding later on once their enzymes are more developed. But that's one of the first things you do is you ask them, are you breastfeeding? Take them off of it. One of the things about this is newborn hyperbilirubinemia is you put them under Billy lights. You put them under lights that deactivates the bilirubin in the skin. And that's how you get the bilirubin level to go down. You put them under Billy lights for a few days. And monitor the bilirubin daily. Okay? If it goes too high and you can't, the Billy lights are not good, you'll have to do a dialysis type process. But 99.9999% of the time, if you have to treat it, most of the time you don't, Billy lights are the way to go. There you go, right there. A baby should never have jaundice within the first day. Within the first day, something else is bad wrong. And they should not be jaundiced after 2 weeks. If so, they need to be seen by a neonatologist. Okay? It's 10 till. I think what we'll do is we'll stop here. And do you have another lecture at 10? We'll stop here. We'll pick up this afternoon and finish this out, and then move right on into the physical diagnosis. Okay? Any questions? Okay. I'll see you this afternoon. Who's lecturing again?
Yes.